Have you ever looked up at the stars in the night sky and wondered what's out there? Have you ever wondered if there's life out there, if there's somebody out there? I'm sure you have. I think most of us have wondered this. I think people all around the world, people of different nationalities and different religions and different faiths and cultures and customs, we've all looked to the sky and wondered if there's life out there somewhere. I'm Tim Selby at Heart of Steamboat. I appreciate you joining me for a few minutes. We've been talking about questions people ask, and I want to get to the question for today in a moment, but I want to begin by talking about what's known as the Drake equation. And the Drake equation is named after the astrophysicist Frank Drake, who in 1960 led the first official search for extraterrestrial radio signals at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in West Virginia. And a year after that, in 1961, Drake introduced a formula that can conceivably calculate the number of civilizations that might be out there transmitting signals out into the Milky Way. The Drake equation looks like this. I'm going to put it on your screen here. How's that for an equation? I'm going to walk you through this because I'm sure you're not really familiar with it, as most people aren't, as I was not. Well, so let's begin at the beginning. N, the beginning N there. N is the number of civilizations currently transmitting signals. That's what we're looking for, trying to answer this question. How many civilizations out there in the Milky Way are there that are transmitting radio signals? And it depends on the 7 factors that follow. So N equals this. That first R is the yearly formation rate of stars hospitable to planets where life could develop. How many stars are being born which could have planets where life could be developed? The next F is the fraction of those stars that would actually have planets. N is the number of planets per solar systems with the conditions that are suitable for life. F is the fraction of planets suitable for life on which life actually appears. The next F is the fraction of planets with life on which intelligent life emerges, not just life, but intelligent life. The next F is the fraction of planets where intelligent life that develops technologies such as radio signals that they could transmit and we could detect. And then that final L there is the average length of time in years that civilizations produce such signs. Now that's an amazing formula, amazing equation. There's lots of theoretical things in there, lots of guesses in there, right? But in Drake's original estimates, using this formula, he came up with that there would be between 10 and 10,000 advanced civilizations in the Milky Way. 10 to 10,000 just in the Milky Way, just in our galaxy. And there are billions and billions of galaxies out there. I think my view is that there is so much possibility of life out there somewhere. There's so much space. There's so much possibility. There's so much to be discovered yet out there in front of us. Or as the famous Carl Sagan once said, if we are the only thing here, if we are the only life in the universe, then that is a great waste of space. So is there something out there? I certainly hope there is and believe that there is something else out there, life out there some way, somehow. It's on my bucket list. It's on my bucket list along with scaring a fainting goat, which I really want to do. On that bucket list would be for us here on Earth, for humans to discover and contact and connect with other intelligent life somewhere in the universe. I would love that to happen before I die. You know, several years ago, the famous Swedish theologian Christer Stendahl at a NASA program on extraterrestrial life was asked what he thought about encountering extraterrestrial life in our universe. And he stated this. He said, "It always seems great to me when God's world gets a little bigger and I get a somewhat more true view of my place and my smallness in the universe. He embraces the vast beauty and wonder of the universe and his small place in it. Another Catholic theologian, John Haas, said that if we made contact with ETs, that would provide an exceptional opportunity for theology to widen and deepen its understanding of divine creativity. It seems to me that contacting extraterrestrials would change our theology, would change our view of ourselves in dramatic ways, and that would be such a wonderful adventure. So we might ask ourselves, if there are extraterrestrials out there, what are they like? Are they a lot like us? Are they different? Are they little green men and women? Are they men and women at all? Or are they just very different from what we understand as life at all? You know, science fiction has helped us out with this, right? With our imagination. From Star Trek, where Captain Kirk and the gang travel through the universe, encountering all kinds of forms of different creatures in different ways. To Star Wars, where we seem to find that the strangest of alien creatures always seem to hang out in bars together. I'm not sure what that's all about. But TV shows and documentaries, imagination that we've had about what's out there. One of the questions that comes up is, if there was extraterrestrial life out there, would they be friend or foe? And we have both images, right? We have the image of this alien that Sigourney Weaver encountered, definitely in the not friendly category. But we also have this image. We've got E.T. in the friendly, very friendly category. And E.T. here is imaged with the Pope. And I wanted to put this picture of E.T. and the Pope because the Pope is the one who asked the question I want to talk about today. In 2014, in a sermon on acceptance, in which he implored the church to not be so judgmental, he asked this question. He said, quote, "If, for example, tomorrow an expedition of Martians came, and some of them came to us here, Martians, right? Green, with long nose and big ears, just like the children paint them. And one says, 'I want to be baptized.' What would happen?" he asked his parishioners. Going on to say, "When the Lord shows us the way, who are we to say, 'No, Lord, it's not prudent'? Who are we to say no?" So that question, would you baptize an extraterrestrial? I know you've probably been wondering about this. It's probably been keeping you up at night trying to figure out the answer to this. But it also begs the question, well, what is baptism? And I'd preface this by saying, in the Pope's hypothetical question here, the extraterrestrial asked to be baptized, asked for it. It's not something you would impose or press on somebody or anybody to impose your religion on somebody. But the question is if the extraterrestrial asked. So what is baptism? Well, in the United Methodist Church, we have two sacraments: communion, sharing of communion, and baptism. And one of the definitions of a sacrament is that it's an outward and visible symbol of an inward and invisible grace. So it's an outward expression of something that happens within us, within the Spirit. And baptism is seen by different people in some different ways, but it really has to do with God's grace washing over us, the love and grace of God coming over us, refreshing us, renewing us, restoring us along the way. It's an outward symbol of this thing that we think is happening within us. And it's also an initiation into community. It's an embrace, a welcome into the community. So the question being, would you baptize an extraterrestrial if they asked for it? And I think the Pope comes around to the answer, yes. Yes, we would embrace and draw people in and affirm that all life, wherever it may be, is covered with the grace and the love of God and welcome to be in community with us. So who knows if we ran into an alien or an extraterrestrial creature, if it would be friend or foe. But we might have a better idea of what our posture would be towards those who might be different from us, of those who are not from our tribe, those who are not of our faith, those who are not of our race, those who are not of our nation, and dare I say, those who might not be of our planet. And as we think about this question, I think we might want to reflect on what Jesus teaches in the parable of the Good Samaritan, in which Jesus taught us how to love our neighbor and taught us to think about who exactly is our neighbor. Now, in this particular parable, Jesus is teaching, and he teaches the great commandment of love. The greatest thing is to love God, to love your neighbor, and to love yourself. And then he's asked, well, who's my neighbor? And when he's asked this question, he goes on to tell this story. A man's walking down the road, and he's beaten and left for dead by robbers on the side of the road. But along comes a priest. Surely the priest is going to help this man out. But the priest doesn't. The priest just walks right on by. Then next comes a Levite, and certainly another esteemed person. And this person certainly is going to help the man on the side of the road. But again, he averts his eyes and walks right on by. Then comes a Samaritan, who's one of the others, an opponent of this Jewish person, a different form of the faith, the ones you don't want to talk to, you don't want to be around, you don't want to touch, the ones you speak derisively of and look down upon. Here comes the Samaritan. Well, they're not going to help. They're Samaritans. But that Samaritan, of course, does help and takes the man to get help and pays for him to have more help. And at the end, Jesus says, who in this story is the neighbor? And the man, even then, he doesn't want to say the word Samaritan. He doesn't say the Samaritan. He says the one who helped, because he doesn't want to even speak his name. So we might ask ourselves, as we read this story from Jesus, does our love and care for others have limits on it? Does it only go so far? Does it just extend to life here on this earth and not beyond that? You see, because if our love had limits on it, and our love would only extend to the people on this planet, well, it might also have other limits on it as well. It might extend only to people in our nation, or to people of our faith, or to people who look like us, or act like us, or believe like us. You see the problem when that love gets limited? See, that same kind of logic is the logic that allowed crusaders to chop off people's heads in the name of Jesus, because you know what? They're not like us. It's the same kind of logic that allowed slave owners in early America to go to church and sing songs about grace and freedom, and to somehow not see that that message had relevance for them right in their own backyard. But you see, those slaves, they were different than us. It's the same kind of logic that allowed plenty of fine Christian people to stand by silently as Jewish people were packed into boxcars and shipped off to concentration camps, because you know what? They were different than us. You see, in the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus is not talking about, hey, you should help the person out on the side of the road. That's not what this teaching is about. If it was just about teaching us to help the person on the side of the road, Jesus could have told it this way. He could have said a man was hurt on the side of the road, and 100 people came by. The first 99 just walked right on by. But the next one, that 100th one, helped the man and gave him aid. Don't be like the 99. Be like that one. But that's not the teaching. That's not what Jesus teaches here. He said, let your ideas of who your neighbor is be blown wide open. Let your ideas of who you might touch and who you might let touch you be expanded beyond your wildest dreams. You see, the parables of Jesus usually have a surprising twist, and that is it. That the neighbor is the one that you might least expect, and you need to learn how to extend your love and your idea of who is your neighbor. We need to let the walls that have been built up between us come tumbling down. And now I get to share some good news. For those of us in the United Methodist Church, some walls this week have been tumbling down. The walls of exclusion that have been there for LGBTQ people in our midst. As our church said that there could not be clergy, that they could not be married by a Methodist minister or married in a Methodist church. And we're told that their very being was incompatible with Christian teaching. At our general conference in Charlotte, that our Maggie Taylor has been a part of, those things were all voted out. It's an amazing and celebratory time for many of us who for so long have wanted this to change, have fought for this to change, have been brokenhearted by it, and now it's just gone. The walls, they crumble quickly. And those years and years of struggle have come to an end in that way. And as they do, I wanted to speak a word of blessing upon our LGBTQ friends and family members. This comes from the Reconciling Ministries Network that says this, and may you hear this. You have never been incompatible. You were expected as you are. You were awaited as you are. You are beloved as you are. It's a beautiful time in the life of our church and a beautiful day out in front of us. This work of inclusion. Our church has been committed to this and doing this work in our world. And it's so important because the work of inclusion is the work of bringing people together. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, father of Methodism, said, though we may not all think alike, may we not all love alike. Isn't that beautiful? We don't all think the same way. We don't all have the same views. We don't want to create a place where everyone just sees things exactly the same way. But we want to create a place where people love each other in a deeper place than just the views that divide us. That our love and care for one another is that foundational place that we operate from and that we keep as the most important thing of all. And that work is needed in our world. As you know, in our world right now, we have war in Israel and Gaza, and the struggle that's there, war in Ukraine, political divides. Have you heard that it's an election year? Have you heard this? And it's probably just going to get worse and more difficult. And so maybe in weeks ahead, I'd like to do a follow-up to this little talk as we jump into how we engage as Christian people in the midst of all of these issues that's so important for us. But let me just conclude with this today. If we ever do find intelligent life out there somewhere, I hope that we're looking for friends and not enemies. I hope that we can see one another as neighbors somehow, some way. But until that day, we have plenty of friends and neighbors right here on earth to care for, to reach out to connect with. So let's get to work. We've got a lot to do. And I just say a final word. If you watch these fast forward messages and they mean something to you and find them important, I'd love for you to think about financially supporting us. That information will be on the screen here in terms of how to do that. It takes time and money and effort to make these things happen, and we're trying to do good stuff in the world. So if you're on board with us, we'd love to have you support us if you are able to. Thanks for joining me. Grace and peace be with you.